and he wait. So that's a scrum for the All Blacks.
The delayed game, essentially.
That's
just got him for delayed game on the restart.
That's a ridiculous call.
Crossfield Jordan away for Barrett Trialbacks. One of his hearts broken.
We just fell short there, and that's probably the most gutting way to finish a game, in my opinion.
90 seconds left in the game, and he cracked under pressure. One of the biggest moments, one of the biggest games here in Australia. It was a disgraceful decision, and World Rugby need to look at it.
This is a quality team going and searching a victory, but it's an opportunity they should never have gotten because the Wallabies were the better team. The Wallabies won the match with their rugby, and the referee took it away from them.
They were quite conclusively wasting time, Australia, but you've never seen it go to that extreme. You usually just get a hurry up, maybe a warning. Oh my goodness. Look, this test match had everything.
This doesn't happen unless a conversation's been had with the referees about this, about time wasting.
You know, calls like this, and, you know, his own teammates telling him to kick it.
Yeah.
You know,
so if they're saying it, right?
They know that it's
exactly
milking it.
Yeah.
Just disappointing. We couldn't, put it to the corner and get a contest there, but, the ref's got a job to do to ref the way he sees it, and that's what he saw, and we weren't good enough to front up.
It's just disappointing. We're talking about a referee call after such a great game for 80 minutes. Found ourselves down 31-13, so to fight back and get ourselves in front. Showed a lot of character, and disappointing way to lose it.
One of the worst things you've ever seen?
Oh, a reserved comment on that, but yeah, look, it's a tough one to take.
What a controversial decision to end a crazy midweek Bledisloe Test match. Kia ora, e te whānau. Hello and welcome. Kirsty away, having a long weekend in Melbourne. So I am joining you for today's breakdown, and joining me, I'm very lucky to be alongside Sir John Kerwin, Mills Muliaina, and Jeff Wilson, who looks beautiful in blue today. He asked me if his eyes looked grey or blue in that shirt, and I'd have to say blue, Jeff.
You can come back anytime.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know the way to your heart. There we go. So we just looked at some of the fallout from the All Blacks' 39-37 victory against the Wallabies, which saw them retain the Bledisloe Cup, but it very nearly wasn't. The ref copping most of the heat this week. A big decision to penalise the Wallabies for time wasting. And they were warned. I have no problem with the penalty, Mills, if the ref has consistently done that throughout the matchup. We've seen Nick White, we've seen new footage today of Nick White saying, mate, you have just cost us the Rugby Championship. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think if referees in general have consistently done that anytime. I've never seen this before, and at the ground when it sort of happened, obviously they were delaying. That was always sort of part and parcel of what sort of happens when you're up. But it was really bizarre. I think looking at it now and having dissected it, it probably looks a little bit more sort of obvious what the referee was saying. But in the heat of the moment, Jeff, or guys, this is massive.
Jeff,
I'm just wasting some time, sorry.
I will penalise you.
Yeah.
Don't think I won't, JK. I'll start off strong.
It's actually not Foley's fault. It's not Knight's fault, the referee. Everyone's time wasting around the world at Test match rugby. Either props are going down, or the game's being slowed up, or you're encroaching at the line out across. I've just never seen it enforced before. So was the referee right? Yes. Was the decision wrong? If you're a New Zealander, no. If you're an Australian, yes. The trouble is we can't leave stuff like time wasting up to interpretation. So what's the law? Take the shot, take the kick.
Well, take the penalty.
Yeah.
You have to take the penalty within a reasonable time.
OK, so what's a reasonable time for you?
A reasonable time for me is the fact that you're not standing around and waiting and watching when you've been given and directive to kick the ball.
So why did he stop the clock?
Because he felt as though it was taking too long.
Exactly. So the ref was right, but unfortunately, no one's seen that rule for 150 million years. Yeah. I've seen it once in my career, and I'm really old, and it was for a shot at Gold Mills. So my problem is, was the ref right? Yes. Was it in the spirit of the game? Yes, because it's part of the rules. But we've got to start thinking about time wasting as a whole, and how do we change that?
Look, I look at this from a perspective that, and I agree, he had every right to make the decision. I don't think in this case it was probably appropriate for it to be made then. It may have been the wrong time to make this call. But I think this is in some ways the opportunity, and we haven't heard from World Rugby, surprise, surprise. They look at what they want their game to be in 12 months' time. at a Rugby World Cup? What is it they want rugby to become at the international level? The fact that manipulating the amount of time that the ball is in play based on what the score is, whether you're down to 14 men, whether you're weak in a particular area of the game. I'm a little bit fatigued. I'm going to sit a prop down so we don't restart the game. All areas that clearly frustrate fans and frustrate people who want to see the game being played. But that's up to World Rugby to decide the type of rugby they want international rugby to be going forward. And whether or not they want to change this, I don't know. The powers that be, Sir John Kirwan, Mills, Laura, that's the Northern Hemisphere, clearly have an influence on how the game is being played. And international test rugby is for everyone. So what's in the best interest? Is this a case where, how do we change the course of this game? Or is the international game just the international game and we live with it?
Well, no one's going to turn up because everyone left the field the other night. 54,000 people walked out frustrated, upset and talking about the referee. Is that how we want international rugby? I reckon the solutions are way easier, Mills. So we're in an anaerobic game. So power game, we're not an aerobic game anymore. To take it into an aerobic game, we need to have time clock on the scrum. And it's like the NBA. Take it out of the referee's decision. So, you know, ding, 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 that annoys you at NBA, right? Just play it. You have 30 seconds to set the scrum and play. You have 40 seconds for a line out, any infringement, free kick. For a penalty, you've got 15 seconds to kick it out and let's speed our game up. Right? Because it's not Foley's fault, and it's not the ref's fault. It's just that every time they go to a ruck, they can interpret 18... Why was it fragmented in the first half, Mills? Because there's 18 decisions to make, and the referee was changing, like, the rules around, so the players couldn't get any rhythm. We've got to take control away from the players and the ref and just make it part of our game.
Yeah, I get that. I think, you know, there's certain aspects that need to be sped up and giving a time frame. I think the biggest one where they try to change is the guys a front row going down or someone being injured. I mean, how do you put a time on that?
Rolling subs.
And the manipulation of, you know, teams to be able to, you know, implement that sort of stuff. So it's probably a good time to come up with a discussion. Well, they need to actually...
See, what happens with that, though, Sir John Kirwan, is...
Rolling subs, mate. Get the props on.
If you create hold on. If you take, you turn this into an anaerobic game, aerobic game, sorry, from anaerobic, who does that take out of the game? All of a sudden, you've talked about NRL constantly about the size of the players has been reduced. Does that mean all of a sudden the role of our big props, our big men, becomes reduced in the game? And the fact,
no, they just
scrum,
body
the line out, the maul, all of those physical aspects of the game, which rugby has become so critical. If we have a look at the game in terms of time on the weekend, particularly the first half, you look at the stats on the first half, they're a damning indictment on the game. I mean, if you look at it, you can't... Everyone's talking what a great contest it was. The first half took 51 minutes and there was a total of just over 12 minutes of actual rugby.
That means that you've got time to go and get 47 pies and 2 pints. Because there's no rugby. That's 12 minutes of rugby. Like...
That's a concern. So when you see those numbers, right?
I totally disagree with your theory that it take people out of the game. All that'll happen is that a prop that's 132 kilos will drop to 122 kilos, and so will his opposition.
Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that.
I've been struggling.
So you're taking the game. Yeah, but I mean, are you taking it away from some of the players?
It's just the way they train. I reckon if you told...
Is that international rugby?
Well,
it could be Super Rugby. It could be something else. I'm just asking the question, what is international rugby? What contest has it become, Mills, now? What has international rugby become?
Well, no one knows, really. I mean, what are they trying to get out of it? I think what's becoming obvious is...
Clearly it's not running.
Well, yeah, it's not. And the fact that, you know, we're talking about decisions that are in the rule book that can be easily interpreted, you know, different ways. I tend to agree with you a little bit, Goldie, in terms of, you know, I wouldn't like to have... you know, a front row that's, you know, 92 kgs or an 82 kg sort of prop. I still would love the power game in there, and particularly the guys when you're thinking about, you know, the South Africans. The technicality that comes with that, the set piece moves, that sort of, the last thing we kind of want, although we want to speed things up, again, you know, we're a little bit confused, although we want to speed things up, I wouldn't want to get to golden oldie rules that they do in rugby league, because it just takes a massive element that we've had traditionally over the last few years, forever.
OK, so we can have rolling subs with our props. Only our props. Can have 6 of them on the bench to go and win the light. But tired, mate, I'm off. Gone. Still 138 kilos. Beautiful. Away you go. But we can't be playing 13 minutes of rugby at international level. What does it cost a ticket? How are we going to bring new people to the game?
So in that case then, JK, do you think the decision then that happened on the weekend, that last minute or 90-odd seconds, is absolutely right going forward? This is now what we need to start, sort of the way we need to play.
No. There's a penalty and the shot clock starts, and we've decided that to take from the penalty to kick it out, you've got 15 seconds. Ding, 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 ding. And if you haven't kicked it out, turnover, penalty, see you later. Free kick, bye. Kick it out, you've got 40 seconds to form the line out. And if you like on Saturday, both teams, they go over the half line, like stop, separate them again. So instead of a line out going there and throwing it in, we're going, you know, like take it out of, because the players, like if they collapse a scrum, there's 16 guys on the ground. People say that's dangerous. But actually, if you reset a scrum, you're doubling the risk of neck injury, right? So if it collapses, right, and you're the defensive Lucy, you're not going to be able to get to your 10. So what are you going to tell your front row? Keep it up at all costs. So naturally, they'll get higher, right? I think if you let the rules, the players, and I'd do it myself, I'd waste as much time as I could in the last 5 minutes off on my head by 3 points. I'd be faking a hamstring because I'm a professional sportsman that wants to win. But I shouldn't be making the decisions. And there's too many rules for the ref. So take it out of the situation.
Well, the pressure this weekend, all of this pressure is now going to go onto Eden Park, right? And I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to see how this game plays out and whether or not there has been a change, whether there's been adjustment when the Wallabies take on the All Blacks at Eden Park. It'll be fascinating.
So we are lucky enough tonight to have joining us the All Blacks head coach, Ian Foster. Fozzie, welcome. Thank you for your time tonight. Now, the fallout continues from those final moments of Thursday's matchup. We're seeing new footage every waking moment. So tell us, from your perspective, do you think that decision is going to have an impact on the game going forward?
Well, in some ways, I hope so. I mean, if it puts pressure on the game to eliminate time wasting, I think that's a positive. But I think there's two separate issues here. Well, there seems to be a big debate about time wasting, and I think that's one issue. I think this is an issue where a referee gave very clear instructions time and time again, and they weren't followed. And ultimately, the ref is the ultimate arbitrator of the game. And if players elect to not listen, then I guess you play with danger in that.
Fozzie, it's been a really interesting championship so far for the inconsistency across the whole tournament from all the squads. But also during the game, we've noticed that the ebb and flow, the inconsistency is higher than normal. I mean, is that something that you're worried about or addressing or thought about?
Yeah, look, it's when we study the game, you certainly look at the ebbs and flows of a game, and it's I don't think anyone has probably put an 80-minute performance together that they would sit back and say, well, they've nailed everything there. Even our performance in Hamilton, I thought our third quarter was a little bit flat for about 15 minutes there. So, we're certainly, cognizant that we're trying to grow our concentration and our game understanding for 80 minutes. We certainly had a flat patch, and I guess between about the 57th minute and about the 70th minute where we really allowed, areas that I think we've been strong in with our defence. We got quite sloppy there and let in 3 tries, and the Aussies were good enough to take that. So, they're a team that never stops, and if we stop again on Saturday, then we've seen what can happen.
Fozzie, really keen to understand your selection this week. Who's available, in particular, Ardie, whether he's back. Some would obviously be forced because of injuries, but does it excite you that some of these guys are now going to possibly get an opportunity to get some test match footy that haven't seen some of that game time?
Yeah, look, it's we've had a great run with injuries, haven't we? I think we've got through most of this championship without having many. Suddenly we sort of had 2 in the same position within about 3 minutes, with Davey and Quinn, and obviously with Sam's head knock. A couple of other niggles have come from the game that we'll have to assess, tonight, tomorrow when we get all the medical reports. So yes, there will be some opportunity, but that's exciting, Mills. We all know that. It's we've got squads that have trained their butts off really to get the team ready, and everyone's got to be ready to play. And again, it's it's going to come down to a bit of a final, a bit of a decider, and someone's going to get a chance to run out there. So that's what Test matches are about, and we'll certainly be ready for that.
Fozzie, the majority of your Test matches this year have been decided in the last 20 minutes. JK talked about these inconsistencies that teams are suffering from. Is it frustrating? How do you believe you can deal with that, the fact that that is when these Test matches are going to be won? And how do you prepare numbers 16 to 23 for that responsibility?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at the last part of the game, there's always two views on the last part of the game. It's like when you're playing in South Africa, the second test, we were down with 15 minutes to go, and South Africa took the lead. So I thought we showed great composure to come back. I thought in Argentina, in Christchurch, again, we were up and I felt quite comfortable, and then we got a bit blinkered in that last quarter. So it depends whether you're up or down, and certainly in Marvel Stadium, up at 31-13, it reminded me of the first Bled last year. I think we were up 33-8 with 15 to go at Eden Park, and they scored 3 tries at the end and made the loss a little bit tighter. So, it just proves you just got to play to the 80, and we're going to work through that in the next 24 hours about what happened with us mentally in that particular spell. But the flip side of it, we did allow Aussie in, but we certainly had a last opportunity to win a game, and we took that. And so there is some positives out of that. A lot's been made of that refereeing decision, but all he gave us was an opportunity to win the game, and we were probably good enough to do that. So in that aspect, I was really pleased the way we finished.
Fozzie, what would you do to change the game around time wasting? If they said, right, Fozzie, you've got 2 things that you're allowed to do, because I reckon if you leave it up to the players, I don't blame the players, because I would have done exactly the same myself to slow the game down the last 3 minutes. What do we do to actually take the control off the ref and off the players to make our game a bit faster?
Yeah, well, I know you've probably got a list of about 10 things, JK, so you probably thought about that a bit more than me, but I think we've already trialled stuff in New Zealand last year at super level with the resets of scrums, speeding up that process, and that was very successful. And it'd be great to see that flow through to the international game. I think huddles and taking your time when you go to lineouts is another one. And then how we deal with constant injuries, particularly the front rowers around line out and scrum time. It's how we deal with that aspect, and it's balancing the need to speed the game up versus I guess the safety aspect, and that's the trouble that we have. But last week's game, a great stadium, indoors. Ball and play was, I think, down about 5 minutes from our test before, down to 28 minutes. So it is something that we want to get the minutes high. We want to play, and we try to do everything we can to do that.
Ian Foster, I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. All the very best for Eden Park. Looking forward to it.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Mills, what did you think of some of his suggestions there to help with the time wasting?
Yeah, well, I sort of dodged a few, but I think he's right. I think the stuff that you've spoken about, the line-outs and in particular, speeding that sort of side of it, obviously, having that gap is still pretty crucial. But I think there's a balance. What I'm interested to see post this is, what World Rugby say, because they always come hard after something sort of happened. They referee it, and then all of a sudden, 3 months later, it's gone.
I think they'll be more concerned that it was 31-13 and we didn't put the game away. This should never have happened. I think they'll be more concerned about that, because those are the things that the All Blacks can control. We should remember, JK, right, this wasn't the All Blacks' fault. None of this would happen at the end of the game was their fault. They got presented with an opportunity and they went and did what they did to try and win the game. So, but they'll be looking at the fact that this should never have gotten the position. And I think they're more concerned about, OK, it'll be status quo, we're back to normal, it's another test match. They won't be thinking about time wasting, they're thinking about being better.
Not Foley's fault, not the ref's fault, not the rules' fault, the interpretation of it.
That's as simple as that then, is it?
It's enough said. Is that closing the door on it?
It's the interpretation of the rules that changes every week because there's too much in the hands of interpretation.
Hence, does it make you nervous for 12 months' time going to a Rugby World Cup? If there's so much interpretation out there, so many big games coming up, Does it make you nervous? It makes me nervous because you've got Northern and Southern Hemisphere referees on different planets.
The ability for World Rugby to anticipate and change the rules at any sort of speed worries me.
We're going to need a longer show if we're going to go down this road, I think.
Particularly with what we've got coming up now, right?
Yeah, we have got a bit on, and he's been watching from Australia. Former All Black Andrew Mertens was reporting for Stan Sport. He was on the ground at Marvel Stadium. Mertz, as you can see and hear, Jesus, a bit on. Have you been surprised by the reaction and the retaliation from Australian rugby off the back of Thursday night's match?
Hi, Laura. Hi, team. No, not really, because they thought they were in with a chance to win the test. And so, you know, the Wallabies came back from a large deficit. They played really well to get back in the game. They seemed to have done enough at the end to have that win. And then, you know, from an Australian perspective, it got taken away from them by a refereeing decision. So, no, it probably doesn't surprise me. You're right, Jeff, with what's coming up. You've got the wrong person on if you want to trim down the show and not talk much about refereeing. But, look, to be honest, and I'm not a massive fan of Mathieu Raynal at all at the best of times, but I don't think that decision was his worst of the night. Far from it. I thought it looked a little bit incongruous in the situation. You know, Australia had just earned a penalty and they, you know, were kicking for touch and stuff. So it did look a little unfair if you take a really objective standpoint. But like you guys said, the All Blacks, what are they going to do? They get given an opportunity. They scrummed. They did well to get over the line. And, you know, you're going to. And so, you know, much as I like Bernard Foley as a bloke as well, he did bugger around a little bit, I think. And he was getting screamed at by not just the referee, but by his teammates as well. I have a little bit of sympathy as well, because I just wonder, you know, some of the language that Raynal was using, he's using French. He's saying we play, you know, they'd say on joue, which means we play, but the better translation is probably let's play or play, which is more of an instruction. If you're Bernard Foley and you hear we play, maybe he's not thinking that's an instruction to me as much and it didn't trigger him. So I've got a little bit of sympathy there for him.
So Goldie was saying before that as maybe international rugby, we just have to accept this. I totally disagree with him.
I didn't say we had to accept it.
So what would you do, mate, about those situations? It wasn't Foley's fault. It wasn't the ref's fault, right? So what do we do to take those decisions away?
Well, I think you've seen other sports put in basically a professional timekeeper or a timekeeping mechanism. You look at tennis, and one of the ways that players can slow tennis down, obviously, is in between points, in particular, you know, with the serve. And so now they've got a countdown. I think they've got 30 seconds from the end of one point to actually get the serve hit at the next point. And so, you know, it's like you say, it's taken out of the umpire's hands. There's a clock, and you've got to work to it. So, you know, we can be, I think as a sport, we can be a lot more professional and modern about it. There's nothing saying that the halves always have to be 40 minutes, because if you start stopping the clock here and there, the game is going to blow out into much longer spectacle than we've currently got. Okay, so make the halves 30 minutes each and stop the clock every time there's a scrum set. The professional timekeeper restarts it when the ball is played at the back of the scrum. If there's a try, you stop the clock there. You don't restart it until the kickoff is taken. So there are ways you can do that and bring it down to 30 minutes a half, but you'll still get effectively the same amount of time for people at the stadium, and you'll get a much higher proportion of the ball in play.
Maurice, I'm keen to move on about time. So let's talk about the Wallabies, mate. I mean, Valentini, Leota, Samu, man, they were massive, you know, for the Wallabies in terms of getting them back into the game. Is that how the Aussie media are seeing it too?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely, and particularly Pete Samu, to have the legs on him at the end of a game, which had been pretty torrid, was quite astounding. I've got to say, I think the stop-start nature of it, when there are lots of stoppages, does play more into Wallabies' hands than to the All Blacks. So, you know, they did come home pretty strongly. So they're pretty proud of that, and rightly so. You know, down 31-13. You'd normally probably expect the All Blacks to close that out, especially when there are a couple of players off the field for the Wallabies. So, yeah, they fought back into it, fought really well, kept firing shots, and those big boys in the back row, they were absolutely the key.
Mertz, what are you seeing from the All Blacks? When you think about their inconsistencies and their performances, where do you feel as though they need to get better in a hurry?
Oh, yeah, I think it's just it's inconsistent, isn't it? You know, I think their skills this year probably haven't been at a consistently higher level that we've become used to with the All Blacks. Obviously, defences are getting more and more fierce, ferocious, faster off the line, and that reduces your time. But yeah, I think the All Blacks haven't been quite as clinical as we have grown accustomed to in the last 12 or 15 years. You know, the pass from Ioane to Beauden Barrett, I can see what Rieko Ioane was trying to do there. You know, he was suddenly got caught in between, didn't pass the ball straight away, didn't run it further himself, got somewhere in between, and it broke down there. The Hoskins Sotutu little chipper here, I don't think we'll see him make a poor decision like that again in his career. We haven't seen it up till now. So there were a couple of chances there that the All Blacks did have to score points, and we'd normally see them put those chances away pretty ruthlessly, and they haven't quite been doing that this year.
A lot of former Wallabies have come out and said the Wallabies were the better team on the night. Do you agree?
No, I thought the game was pretty even. I think, like I say, with the number of stoppages, and that's another, not time wasting, but it's another issue we've got to address in rugby, the number of things you can get away with as a defensive team and earn a penalty where you probably don't really deserve it. You know, just sticking your hand on the ball when it's, you know, close to a tackled player on the ground without trying to steal it, that gets you a penalty. Limpeting and latching on to the tackled player on the ground, that can often get you a penalty as well. So we've got to clean that up and provide a bit more, I guess, favouritism for the team with the ball. But so, no, I mean, Australia, I think it was an even game. I think the All Blacks dominated and just didn't take their opportunities. The Australians took their opportunities more. But to say that they were the better team, I think that's stretching it a little bit from the Australians, but they did really, really well. And in the context of the number of injuries they've had this season and the depth that they're building in the squad, I think they're going along pretty nicely.
Andrew Mertens, thank you so much for your time tonight and for sharing that beautiful view with us. It looks lovely.
Yeah, well, it's not my apartment. I had to come to Justin Harrison's because he now owes me dinner after that loss we had a bet on. He's had a shocker in the kitchen just before he mistook his head for an enormous potato and tried to wrap it in tinfoil, put it in the oven. So anyway, that's not my view, but it's nice to come into you from Sydney, especially after a win.
Well, that's a lot of information right there. Thank you, Andrew Mertens. Really appreciate your time. Right, we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we discuss the Rugby Championship decider at a sold-out Eden Park. We'll see you soon.
The Rugby Championship is alive and well. Could be anybody's game.
Playing advantage, 5 wide on the left.
Lost it. Out wide again, and Moody, the Gustav Moody. He's a metre short. Hendrickson! The penalty try. Hendrickson. Malcolm Marks around the corner. Quick ball for the Springboks. Jaden Hendrickson sells the dummy. Marks in control. Looking good. Over. Centerfield created options both sides. Kribber. The inside ball was not forward. On the attack, they're looking good. Moroni!
Nothing wrong with the grounding.
Fast attack. Mostert.
23 offside again.
Now the offside. Dialandi stays on his feet. Dialandi's over. To the right side. Oxenshire soft hands. Mark's got a chance. Mapimpi outside. On by the 22. Makazola Mapimpi. The pickup for Marks. Malcolm Marks in the corner. Springboks victorious by 36 points to 20.
Plenty of talking points from that matchup as well. 36-20, South Africa took out that match. Welcome back to Breakdown. Rugby Championship is in its final round this weekend. South Africa are 1 win away, and the All Blacks most likely 1 win and a bonus point away from winning the title. Now, Nick White was not wrong, I think, if we take a look at the points table when he said that the decision over last week's game really cost Australia the championship. Is this the tightest rugby championship that you can remember, Mills?
Absolutely. I think I can't remember when it has been this sort of close, has it? It's been right down to the last weekend, and you could come down to points differential. And you know, I suppose that the difference after being with COVID and stuff like that is being able to travel once again and have sort of games at home for the likes of Argentina and particularly South Africa too, Jeff.
The Springboks scoring a try in the last minute of that game this morning was critical. The fact that now they're equal with the All Blacks, they don't necessarily need a bonus point, but they'll back themselves at home against the Pumas. But in saying that, the All Blacks are at Eden Park, and that's a big assist for them. But in terms of it being even, yeah, did we expect this? No, the score's tells us it was
Aussie
even.
can still win.
Oh, absolutely.
They just got to win by bonus point, and South Africa and New Zealand need to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's
still
possible.
So plenty to play for.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
2 years of tradition.
Yep.
Plenty for the Australian team to play for.
Well, they'll be motivated, no doubt about it. I just think for the All Blacks, you know, they're going to have to make some change by the looks of things.
Who do we play at 12?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of those forced changes.
Who do we play at 12?
Fozzie, who's keeping relatively tight-lipped, as you imagine he would. Mills, are there any changes that you would make that weren't forced?
Well, obviously, I think Roger needs to come in, right? That would be the one that I think you need to give him a bit of game time. Ardie Savea, he'll probably return as well. I like the way Hoskins went in the weekend. I think, you know, just a bit of more experience for him. And obviously, you know, Dalton Papali'i, I think, you know, he probably needs a bit more game time, and that's probably forced with, you know, with the likes of how Sam Cane sort of pulls up.
So who's where? In regards to the positions in the loose forwards, before we talk about Raja Tuivasa-Sheck, because JK's wanting to, I want to make him wait. He just has to wait a little bit longer. If Shannon Frizzell's available for selection, I'll pick him straight away. I put him back in, I move Scott Barrett in the middle row, and I bring Brodie Retallick off the bench. You know, I think in terms of our last 20 minutes, we need as much experience, and whether or not it's Ardie Savea coming off the bench if Dalton Papali'i starts. Yeah. And whether he's Hoskins Sotutu deserves another opportunity. What do we want to find out about these guys? I just think for me, you know, could Ardie Savea play at 7 at this Test match? You know, I think there's real valid conversations to have, but it comes and starts at blindside flanker. The whole conversation about our forward pack for me starts where Scott Barrett plays, because he has to play. And if Shannon Frizzell's fit and available, I'd like to see him back in there, because I think he's been a difference maker for us.
JK? Your reply.
So I don't think he will start Roger Tuivasa-Sheck at 12, Mills. I would like to see that. Just throw him in the deep end, but we've got the cup in the cupboard now, Bledisloe Cup. We want to win the championship, but if you're thinking about World Cup, I'd like to see Roger Tuivasa-Sheck start, but I think he'll play Geordie there, and I think he'll put Will at fullback, because I think we're struggling out wide with our defensive pattern, especially our outside-in defence pattern, so they want to see other guys there. I think Frizzell will come straight back in. Would I give Hoskins another crack? I personally would. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think he needs to go to the deep, dark place a little bit more in the last 20 minutes, and I think you can only learn that by playing. So I think Sam Whitelock needs a rest, but maybe we'll get him through the last one, and then he's got a bit of time off and they're going to Europe. But for me, I think the biggest decision is what you do with Geordie Ballot, because then you change your whole backline. You know, will the fullback, what are you going to do on the wing? Who comes back in? Nuku might come back in. So, but I think there's a couple of structural things in defence that we need to look at as well. Our outside in defence has let us down and right across the championship. But we've got the cup. Play Roger.
I think that's the key thing. I think it gives them the comfort now we've won the cup. And often people will say, well, don't mix things up, you know. I think we need to do that. I think he's been probably wanting to do that for a long time, get guys out on the field and get them to the experience they need in Test match footy. OK, I know there's history behind Eden Park and things like that, and there could be the view that we might go there and lose it. I wouldn't be necessarily concerned if that sort of happened. I still think we've got the players to be able to go out there and win well. I think it's a chance now for Ian Foster to really try and grow more of that depth and have guys like Hoskins, you know, back up once again. You know, get maybe, you know, if guys need a rest, put them on the bench, right? But add a guy like Tupou Vaya out there. You know, he was outstanding during, you know, Super Rugby. So I think growing more depth for the bigger picture would be my view of this.
JK's pointing his pen.
I've got a question.
When he's pointing his pen at me, all of a sudden...
I have a talking pen.
I have a question for you, because if we do that, if we play Roger at 12, we only make one change. If you put Geordie, you have to make 3 changes. What would you do if you're a little bit worried about...
What am I worried about?
Defence patterns.
The defence patterns? Look, I think Roger Tuivasa-Sheck needs to play this Test match. And it's more likely he's going to come off the bench. But in saying that, I think Geordie's still been really good at fullback. He's played some really good rugby, and they've varied how they've used him. And it's about looking at our defensive systems. I've got concerns. I mean, we're getting found out in regards to what's happening on the outside, links between our midfield and our outsides when we're pushing, when we're turning in. There's not enough work together to get to the outside. Some of Rieko Ioane's work is remarkable using his speed, but I think at times we end up quite often with two players defending one guy, and there's not enough talk for me that's enabling guys to shift, and guys are getting on really bad angles. Will Jordan got found out, Caleb Clark, bad angles because I don't think there was enough communication telling them where they needed to go. They were gambling. We can't afford to do that when they're the All Blacks against a good team who could shift the ball, and the Wallabies could shift us against us. So if I'm talking about those changes you're looking at, I don't actually have a problem. The more I've thought about him starting at 12 in this test match, because then we haven't made any other changes. This is the one. The only thing is you've got to find some more distribution, because that's what, and a kicking game, which David Havili was adding.
I just want to go back to your point, JK, and yours as well, thinking bigger picture, and, you've got a World Cup 12 months away. But this is an All Blacks team that's been under pressure that, like, I've never seen as an All Blacks fan. So can you really afford to be thinking so far long-term when right now it doesn't seem to be the perfect finished product as is?
No, I think it's a great question. No, you can't. That's why I would play Roger, just because it's one change. We've got some problems with our structures, and I'm sure they'll get better. I'm not worried about it. We've got new defence systems, I get that. But if you play Roger, you find out about him, and you only make one change, Mills. And you know what it's like when you're talking about combinations, right?
Yeah, exactly. And all it becomes is one person moving into that role. The downside of that is what was just starting to blossom is that sort of combination of, Havili, we bring something different. The kicks, the cross kicks from him from the second phase out. Roger doesn't bring that, So what are you trying to bring in terms of whether he goes out there? I think he needs experience. He needs to get out there. But otherwise, why pick him in the first place? But let him grow into that, get his footwork going, and sort of work him into the game. So it's a different style. But then on the back of that, who are you going to play out a bit wider? What sort of their roles changed as well. When you talk defence, when they're trying to fix defensive stuff, it's to bring someone in there under the pump where he's only first year of rugby. We probably won't see consistency that we're sort of asking for because of that sort of reason. But this is a great time now for Ian Foster to be able to do that, I think, because we've kept the Bledisloe. He's kept his job. We know where we go in terms of the Rugby World Cup, but also gets Roger some experience, some key experience in a big match. Going forward for the, for the bigger picture.
It's a precarious time for the All Blacks, there's no doubt about it. Now, life after rugby can be scary for a lot of players. James Marshall is taking the bull by the horns and making it happen with What a Lad podcast, and not one but two big coaching gigs. We caught up with him to find out how he's juggling it all.
What a lad. Well, today we have one of the more popular guests to have come on What a Lad already, where he told his incredible story, where he went from picking a...
Always thought the idea of a podcast would be pretty cool.
This is the most excited I've been to have a guest on today. He is an incredible player and somehow even a better lad. It is the great Conrad Smith. Kendra Coxedge, welcome. Richie Moanga, welcome, brother.
What an intro. Holy. 7 episodes was the goal, and I think I'm up to now about 160 or something, and just loving it.
I was thinking maybe a comeback was coming.
The success has sort of surprised me a little bit. It's just been awesome to, I guess, get messages from people after episodes and saying how much they've taken out of that, or how awesome it was to hear what that guy was really like.
So the boots are all hung up now. Are you getting itchy feet? The season started?
Absolutely not, mate.
The Nicky could probably do with a 13 too.
The team naming came, I was like, I'm not going to be named. And then when it finally did, holy.
My rugby career, I think it was 12 years in the end, starting here in Tasman. There was moves every sort of 6 months. Started off with Italy, then up to Taranaki and the Hurricanes. Headed over to London Irish, Red Sparks in Japan, and then Hurricanes to finish. The back end of my career, once I hit sort of 28, 29, I was really struggling on my left hip in particular. Struggled to put my left sock on and left boot on before a game. It became a real mental battle for me to prepare myself for trainings and get through the week, and COVID actually hit and I wasn't really playing for the Canes at the time, and I went up to the coach's room and said, how about this is a good opportunity to get my hip surgery, and in the back of my mind I knew that I was unlikely to return to the game. The coaching transition happened really quickly. I just had my hip surgery. I think I was still on crutches. I heard the news that Carlos had left the Hurricanes, so I had a call from Jason Holland asking if I would fill his role for the remainder of the season. I was literally one day down in the players' locker to the following day up into the coach's box.
Swap sides. One of the great coaches around. What a lad.
I asked Tasman if I could sign with Tasman as a player. I signed with them for $1, and that was just purely to learn as much as I could as a coach. I was purely there pretty much to learn off the likes of Andrew Goodman, Clark Dermody, Shane Christie.
It's great news, team. Great news. One of the media fraternity is now going coaching with the Crusaders. James Marshall, welcome to Super Rugby, mate.
Yeah, the Crusaders opportunity came out of nowhere. Like, I was preparing for this Tasman season. I did promise my wife that I wasn't going to chase the coaching dream because we'd moved the family so much. But when you get that phone call from Razor, you know, the most successful team in Super Rugby history, pretty hard offer to turn down. Oh, thanks again for coming on the What a Lad podcast, mate. Always. Yeah, I don't know the full plan of what's next for What a Lad, because obviously the Crusaders' job's going to be pretty intense. It's something that I really want to keep doing. Potentially in the off-season might be a good chance for me to keep it going and making sure I can give players a platform to share their stories or share what they want. Absolute honour having legends like you on the podcast, so I really appreciate you giving up your time. You're a lad.
I tātou I te wiki o te reo Māori. Mā te aha atu pēr. I haere tō tātou reo rangatira. Ki te kēmu rangatira o Aotearoa. Ora aua ko te pautaha tūwhera. Funaki. Arawe te rā, te tuku tuarua. Kua piro. A TJ Pere Nara. E noho moke moke nei te hira Ranfurly. Oh, kua taukinga, ringa ringa. Oh, mai mani. Wauki mai te pōra. Oh, go! No reira. Aha koa. Te kāri koa whai ki runga ia Pere Nara. Ko Victoria te whakanui a tara. Te Gloria. O tēnei. Te hira Ranfurly. Kua tuhia ki ngā mata.
Awesome to hear the Te-reo and fantastic to see the passion there. Welcome back to break down the Ranfurly Shield. We've just seen there changed hands. The log of wood now belongs to Wellington for the first time in 14 years. But we are moving to the business end of the NPC, and it is time for our panel to pick their winner. Now, Jeff, fresh off Bay of Plenty's big win, who is your winner?
Who's my winner? I tell you what, I commentated at the Waikato team during the week, and I tell you what, they look really, really good, really balanced, really deep. They've had some guys on the bench that have made an impact for them. I really like the way that they're playing this year. It's nice to have someone like Damien McKenzie on your roster. They brought him off the bench on Wednesday night against Southland. You know, I really, really look at this squad and I'm impressed with what they're doing. I had Hawke's, funnily enough, 7 days ago, I actually had Hawke's Bay was the team. We ran out of time on the show. But for Hawke's Bay now not having the Ranfurly Shield, I think there's a real come down from that. You can build on that, and I think they'll find it really tough to get themselves back up. I'm picking Waikato.
Mills?
Well, it's hard to go past Canterbury as well. Waikato do look very, very good, you know, but the other teams, particularly Tasman, I've found that they haven't found consistency. You know, they had a few All Blacks come back, a few weeks ago, but they're really struggling with their game. So in terms of that sort of the odds pool, you know, Auckland as well, they're struggling with a bit of So I think you might be right. Waikato could be the team, but you know, Canterbury, there's some fire there too.
Is that picking one? Is that picking one, or I think
or just choosing both
times.
Waikato.
Well, my heart always picks Auckland.
Yeah, I could have said Otago.
My emotional side says Auckland. I think that, do we have a Shield challenge the next week? Just a question, because that's what normally the hardest game to win. I think Hawke's Bay will bounce back, because when you lose something like that, you need to grab hold of something. But I think the most complete side at the moment is Waikato, and we've got the best ever bench impact, amazing player that we're missing in the All Blacks that can turn a game on its head. In Mackenzie, I can't wait to see him back in the All Blacks, because if you think about this week and you think about Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who do you put on the bench? Actually, you put Damien McKenzie on the bench, because he can cover 10 on the wing at a pinch and fullback. So the answer was...
Beauden Barrett?
Eh?
What are you doing with Beauden Barrett if you do?
Well, that's right. You just put them both out there.
And good luck, and let teams chase us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look at the results on the weekend. North Harbour just had a really good win against Northland, and a lot of these teams that get momentum. Look, I'm taking a stab of it. We talked about the Rugby Championship, Laura, being close. I think this NPC, when it gets to knockout time, any one of the 8 teams that make it could win.
Let's have a look at the standings right now. Let's see where it all sits. So, JK, talk us through what you see here. What is this telling you?
That I picked Waikato and I was right.
But it's not...
Perfect. Well, that'll do. No, that's fine. We'll wrap it up there.
Well, I think for Wellington, Wellington have got a Shield challenge, I think, this week, and it's Waikato going down to take them on and play on. So if you think about the teams that have had momentum, but you look about the way things have played out and the wins and losses, I mean, reality is there's a lot for these teams to play for. And Tasman are a team who are defending champions, who haven't managed to find their feet this year. I think across the board, and it's going to be important. Home field advantage will take its toll, and then all of a sudden the other thing is, what happens close to the end of year tour? What happens then with some of those players if they get selected? Do they come out of the NPC, for an example? Doesn't Damien McKenzie, is he there for the final match if he's in there? So all of a sudden there's some things that will still play out. But if you look at what I have noticed is it's a seriously high-scoring games this year. You know, been massive scores. Is that what we expect when we get finals time? I'm not so sure.
What do you think of the new format, Mills?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's probably justified why they've gone to that new format, because anyone can beat anyone on the day. You know, they didn't have enough time that everyone played everyone, but I think that 8 and home advantage is going to be really key. So you know, the mixing of that in the final few weeks before that sort of happens is key. So love it. That's exactly what we sort of were after. You know, that sort of that closeness.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, we've had a lot of rugby legends on this show over the years. I'm sitting next to 3 of them. One very special servant of the game is being celebrated on October 6th. Of course, I'm talking about Buck Shelford, and you can join him to celebrate him and his career. Tickets and tables are available at the website that you will see pop up very shortly. Now, JK, you had a tribute dinner. What was it like? Is it a bit weird?
Yeah, no, it's very weird.
Because you're still alive, you know what
exactly.
I mean? So you're just hearing everyone talk about you.
I toured Australia once with this old Italian guy. He was my manager, and he saw all these statues of like Laurie Daly and stuff, and he says, mate, like, our statues of the people that lived 1,000 years ago, you guys are still alive. But I think Buck will love it. I was embarrassed and didn't really want to do it, but when you're there with your mates and they're talking about rugby and it's not too overdone, it was just a really lovely evening, and you know, Buck deserves the accolades.
Now let's take a little look at a clip of the dinner.
Shelford coming into his own. What a great run by Wayne Shelford. Shelford going right to 2 Deans. And that's Shelford. And that's a try for the All Black captain. A remarkable game.
So if you want to go to that, make sure you check out all the details at the website we have put up there, Jeff.
I was at
What was it like?
It turned into a bit of a roast, which was quite good fun. It was, yeah, all of a sudden you had someone you could pick on. It was really, really clever. But before you go, you got us to pick our teams for the NPC.
Oh,
you can't just sit there and select your side. I mean, make it very, very clear. You've got to justify it.
Well, Canterbury, because they're Canterbury, and I think that's all I really need to say. Now, before we go tonight, because we are running out of time, I'd love to get your predictions for Saturday night. Obviously, sold out Eden Park just very fast. You've got like one word. Yes, All Blacks, Wallabies, JK.
All Blacks win by 12 and under.
12 and under?
All Blacks for me, plenty of spice.
All Blacks.
All Blacks.
All Blacks.
Just like that. Well, how about that? Well, thank you guys so much for all your thoughts and feelings tonight. Of that, there were a few. Thank you very much for joining us at home. We will see you next week on The Breakdown.
Brilliant ball. Damien McKenzie's in. Intercept. Josh Temu. He might go himself. He will. Intercept, and they look to race away. The Stags will have too much pace, will they? You bet. Tucker drops it a standing grubber kick. Narawa's racing. Narawa gets the bounce. Narawa will score. Now the pick and go Lakai, but the right arm available. They're going to win the Shield for the first time since 2000.